All right, we're live. Welcome to another episode of Elevate Your Grind. I am your host, Todd Rosales. As always, we are mid-July and things are going great. Guys, I've really been enjoying doing this show. I hope you've been enjoying watching it. We've got some amazing guests coming up this summer. Today's guest is absolutely incredible. Again, I know I say that every single time, but the quality of guests that we're getting on the show is amazing. Some of the top names in the industry, and I really want to shout out somebody, Matteo Communications. Thank you, Rosie, Matteo, and your entire team for deeming our show good enough to open it up to your client book. Really appreciate you giving us some of your guests, and we look forward to continue working with you. Looking forward to this week, guys. We've got an awesome interview today. Tomorrow, we've got Todd Green from Juicy Holdings. That's going to be a good call. They just had their earnings call this morning, did an amazing job. So we're really looking forward to that interview. Next week, we've got Socrates Rosenfeld from Jane Technologies. We've got Alex Milligan from Nug. And then on Thursday, July 16th, I'm very, very excited to announce our 50th episode of Elevate Your Grind. Actually happens to be my birthday as well. We've got an extremely special guest. Some of you may know him, some of you may not, but Eben Britton, the co-host of Mike Tyson's Hot Boxing and his own podcast now, Ebb and Flow. Eben is an ex-NFL athlete and has reinvented himself. Really excited for that conversation. Should be a very special episode that we're looking forward to. After that, we've got Carson Humiston from Vanks, Eric Schnell from Mood 33, and then Cynthia Salarizada from Saka Wines. So awesome guests to round out the summer. Really looking forward to taking the show into the fall. Folks, if you've enjoyed these episodes, do me a favor. Again, I'm looking at all you guys out there. I see who you are. I know who watches the show. I know a lot of you watch it. You're not subscribing. Find us on YouTube, Elevate Your Grind, subscribe to it, like the podcast. Really appreciate it. It's going to help us going. Okay, today's guest. Today's guest has done probably more in the past few years than I've done my entire career. He is on the Forbes 30 under 30 list, has numerous amounts of accolades that we can go through and probably take up the entire hour. He's successfully built and exited a few companies and now is one of the largest or one of the most influential CEOs in the cannabis space. Please welcome someone who's younger than me that I am looking up to, Ryan G. Smith, the founder and CEO of LeafLink.
Thanks, Todd, for your overly generous intro, and also thanks for having us.
No, man, I really appreciate it. You know, I look at folks like yourself, and I think it is inspirational, right? I think a lot of us are raised with this mentality of, you know, grow up, go to school, get a job, be safe, make money. And, you know, looking at your resume, man, it's very inspiring. And I think it's really cool what you've done. I want to start out by asking you, you know, when you're that young and you've found success and you're getting these accolades like Forbes and Fast Company, how do you stay grounded and continue to just grind every day and not buy into the hype?
So I like that it's nice everything you're saying around, you know, being successful and feeling, I don't feel that way. I think we've accomplished a lot at LeafLink, but I think our team feels like there's still so much more to get done. And so maybe the answer to the question is I don't think the things we've done we're proud of. We've worked really hard to get here, but there's so much more to do that, like, it's great in the day when we get this vanity, you know, award or that great, whatever. It's awesome in that moment. But the next day, like things go, you know, things are popular one day and then the next day you still have to keep building, and that's what we're always focused on. So we're proud of what we've done, but then there's so much more that you can't really get wrapped up in. You're only as good as yesterday, right? So like today's a new day and have to keep pushing forward. And that's very much how we think about what we're building at LeafLink and run the company.
Very cool, man. No, I can respect and appreciate that. I think that certain people are built with either a mentality or a gene that, I don't want to say that nothing that you do is good enough for you, but you look at something, you're like, yeah, that was good, but it could be better. And that's what keeps driving you forward. I'd love to kind of talk about your upbringing and really what inspired you to become an entrepreneur, because it is a tough path to take. I'll be honest, I was doing my research on you and I came across a podcast that you did. I think it was called Hacker Noon or something along those lines. And the kid on that podcast, the amount of research that he did on you, calling your old high school and your old coaches and everything else, I was looking at that and I'm like, Holy crap. I am not nearly as prepared for this interview as that. Do you recall
I
that?
remember the interview talk. He was at another level, and I'm actually friendly with him too. So I think he was willing to like step hard forward. But yeah, that was a interesting one.
Dude, that kid was incredible. I thought I did a good job with my due diligence watching that show. I'm like, okay, kid, you got to step it up. So this is your third company that, and I'm sure there might've been others along the way, but looking at your LinkedIn, you had two companies before this, that you worked on and exited. And now LeafLink is the third one. We're going to spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about your wins. Do you have any losses that you can talk about, or any things that didn't work out to just kind of talk to folks about?
Yeah, I mean, so I'll say that first off, LeafLink in my mind is at a whole nother level of prior things that I'd done. I had a company in college that we sold to some other students, probably closer to a project than like a company. There's two of us on the team. The company that I sold after that was less than 10 people. And I mean, they're just completely different. We're in such a transformational period in time and industry with LeafLink that I think it's really a whole nother level. But yeah, I don't know if I'd say they're all the same, but yeah, that was, you want to know failure. Okay. So I'm not really into fashion or clothing necessarily, but I had a company that I thought would be a good fashion line. In college, a lot of people would wear like crazy loud clothing at day parties. That was very like 80s looking. And so I thought, oh, this should definitely be a clothing company that just does this like ridiculous outlandish, basically vintage 80s looking clothing. And started that, had some mock-ups made. I still have a few of them, but was not a successful venture. Found out I wasn't passionate about fashion. And so that company died. That was a failure, but I learned a couple interesting things.
Oh, I don't think it'd be a failure, because you just gave us the lesson you learned there. You're like, okay, well, if I'm gonna do something I'm not passionate about, it may not be as successful as the things that I am passionate about. So, let's fast forward to LeafLink, and you'll notice I have zero structure to this show. I'm gonna bounce all over the place depending on what I'm interested in at the time. LeafLink, dude, I mean, it incredible company. What you guys are doing is automating. Not really automating, but really helping connect the wholesale side of the business. And, for us down here in Florida, that's foreign, right? Because we're completely vertical integrated here.
Hopefully not for long. Yeah.
You're preaching to the choir, sir. But yeah, we're vertically integrated here. But for those of you outside of Florida, there are wholesale, there's retail, there's different parts of the supply chain that has to interact with each other. Let's rewind. What brought you to the point where you're like, there is a large gap here in the cannabis space, and this is our opportunity? Did you start to get involved, or you just kind of have your ear to it? Were you looking to invest in the space? How did you discover that gap not being in the industry yet?
So there were a couple of things that played into my co-founder, Zach, and I. He's our CTO, starting LeafLink. The first for me is I've always loved business to consumer B2C marketplaces. I've sold things online on eBay since like 6th grade. I've sold like one shoe, used ski equipment, like anything that was laying around the house. If it disappeared, my parents would say it's probably in Ryan's PayPal account now. And so I just loved, I used to I had a map in my childhood room with like pins on where I had shipped things all over the world. And I love that idea of connecting with people who now, you may never know again, and they find value in what you're in this case selling them. And Zach was actually at eBay when we began thinking about working together and how we could do that. And there's not a lot of B2B marketplaces that provide the efficiency that we all take for granted. There's like a B2C marketplace now for everything, right? Like sneakers, antique furniture. But then you go to work, and when you have to buy things, you're emailing, writing up a purchase order, you're texting, emailing. So why does that change? It's still a human buying something at the end of the day, even if it's in the name of a business. And so we got excited. So there was a lot of marketplace stuff. On the cannabis side, my company that I sold before LeafLink was in a regulated space, although it was financial regulations. And we spent a lot of time talking with FINRA and the SEC. And I really learned in that experience that the regulators are our friends. And anyone that thinks you can buck the trend of following the rules, or at least in this industry, cannabis now, the rules that exist, that's just not a long-term plan. Like, you need to work closely with, and I learned that in that experience. And I also, that company that bought my company was a very old school finance type firm. Think like dark wood, mahogany walls, everyone, you know, the ties, not just a tie, but the tie that's like, you know, comes out because they have a bar underneath it, like that kind of environment. And so
Pinstripe
I
suits.
thought, so I was like, what is the exact opposite of this? And I'm excited about, and we could really define a space. I mean, at the end of the day, in the cannabis industry, there's a lot of really incredible entrepreneurs and operators and teams that were just at that point, and even now, not given these simple tools to run their business. And so Zach and I thought it was absurd that we couldn't, like, why aren't these tools available to this incredible industry that obviously is going to only move in one direction, towards mainstreaming? This was 5 years ago, so it was a little bit of a, you know, a little bit more up in the air than even it is today. But those two things together, and then when we started flying out to Colorado at the time and Washington, we really confirmed, like, there is a need here, and this community, this industry really requires these tools, and maybe we can bring it to them. And that's where LeafLink started. I did, one thing I'll say is my co-founder, Zach, had been thinking about a marketplace for cannabis since high school. He's a couple years older than I am. So maybe there was things brewing in his mind for a little bit longer, but that's how we, you know, came to start the company.
Super interesting. Where's Zach from? Is he an East Coast guy like you?
He is. He's from Maryland. So he's been in New York for, I guess, over like 10, 12 years now.
That's cool. That's something that he's been thinking of for a long time, you know, and it just so happened that it became legal and he was able to do that. Right. I mean, otherwise he would have ended up being the guys from Silk Road, and that didn't end up well, but you know, it's awesome.
Yeah.
No. So you guys were able to do this legally. I think it's really cool because you're right. You know, so I come from the tech space and I work for large resellers in this space. And when you're buying and selling product, like you said, you're dealing with salespeople. You're dealing with, I hate dealing with salespeople, even though I am one, right? You're dealing with salespeople. You're writing POs. You have to deal with this vendor and that vendor, and they want to take you out to lunch, this and the other. There's not just like an Amazon that you can go on and say, okay, I need these servers or I need these switches or whatever it is. You know, I think it's really cool that you guys have the opportunity to start this in the cannabis space from the ground up. When we're looking towards the future, is LeafLink, at least the technology, going to stay in the cannabis space, or do you have ambition of taking this to other industries, maybe further into agriculture or into other B2B plays? Because I don't see too many plays like this.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a ton to accomplish for the LeafLink community and the cannabis industry. And so I don't want to say no to anything, you know, down the line. But one of the visions that we have is, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we've created a community on LeafLink of over 5,000 retail shops, 1,500 brands that are transacting amongst themselves. Roughly 24% of all US wholesale cannabis is now moves through LeafLink's marketplace. And for us, simplifying that process is particularly challenging in cannabis because, I mean, you know, there's new brands every week. There's new retailers every few weeks, new product lines, new prices, communication's difficult. There's a number of other challenges along the supply chain. And so what we think our opportunity is, I don't know if we're going to be, there's still so much to figure out. I don't know if we'll be the company that's going to be in all these other industries. But what we would really like to do is, the cannabis industry, everyone has referred to it as the Wild West for as long as I've been in it. We would love that in 3 to 5 years, the coffee, the paper, the other industries look at cannabis and they say, wow, that is an incredibly efficient supply chain that sits on a virtual technology that is a B2B marketplace, that is LeafLink. And like, let's be like cannabis. I think that's something, that's really what we want to perpetuate, because I think that's the opportunity we have. There's not a lot to really disrupt in the industry. Most companies are some form of a startup. Most markets, the industry itself is a startup, right? So like, what can we create now that will be a model for others to emulate? That gets us really excited. If it's going to be us doing it, I don't know, but there's still so much to accomplish right now in the cannabis industry.
That's really cool. And the two things that I've noticed about you in the short time that we've been talking, I mean, maybe 15 minutes or so, is you seem to kind of really enjoy the game. Like you're not in there, you're not chasing money. You talked about, your eBay selling and everything else. And I don't mean to pull the Gary V card here, but you just really enjoy being in the thick of
You'd
things,
have to
adding
scream
value.
more, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I would. I mean, listen, when I talk in my normal life, I definitely curse and do everything else like him. But you enjoy the connecting people and adding value. There wouldn't be too many people that had a successful eBay business that probably had a map on the wall just to see where they're selling things. And then just based off the question I just asked you, when I'm like, hey, do you have ambitions to go? You're like, no, I got to focus on what I do well. And I'm going to do that. And then once that's operating good, then we'll look at the next thing. I think those are two key traits to your success. Would you say that you're more passionate, that you're almost kind of like a creative in a business environment, right? That you're really looking to build and create something versus just chasing after the unicorn when it comes to money?
When we're a quickly growing team, right? And we do interviews, and often in interviews, somebody will ask, well, you've raised venture capital, we've raised over $50 million. What's the exit? What's the end of the story? And I think there's a uniqueness to what we're doing in the industry that, like, when will there be another opportunity to work with a proven product that people will continue to buy with massively underserved business operators that is all growing before our eyes, and we get to grow with it. Like, we get to grow together. There's this unifying goal of the whole industry across where we all sit. That's incredibly unique to me. And I don't think it's as straightforward of a story as a simple SaaS platform with one offering where you hit X revenue, you do it multiple of that, and then X company comes in and buys you, and that's a wrap. I think there's something not only unique about the timing, but also in what we're providing, because there's not a lot of comps to what we do either in even more traditional industries. That, like, I want us to build that story as long as we possibly can, because I really think we have an opportunity to be the comp that we couldn't find, that Zach and I couldn't find, as to, like, what is a B2B marketplace and how do you determine it's successful a few years out from now. There may be, we're a tech company, right? So there may be a moment where we more deeply partner with a larger company, or we take the company public. If and when that makes sense, we'll think about it. But right now, like, there's so much to do, and that's what we're super heads down on.
Very cool. So talk to me about, so LeafLink obviously solves a huge need. What was the industry like before you guys came around? I mean, I think, like you said, the markets there weren't too many markets yet. I'm assuming that you had retailers, you had wholesalers. A new wholesaler pops up. He gets a sales guy, a sales rep. That sales rep drives around to dispensaries, cold calls dispensaries. Hey, try our new product, drops off some samples, some stuff like that, is on the road all day trying to hit all the places he can. On the other side, you have retailers that, they want to carry the best product. They want to have what's selling. They're probably doing a ton of networking, doing a ton of researching. What are people buying? What's the popular brand? What are the popular strains? Who are these popular strains coming from?
Yep.
And with so many different retailers and wholesalers popping up all the time, how can you tell who's, let's be honest about our industry. There's a lot of bad players in our industry too. How can you tell who's legit, who's not, and everything else? What was the industry like before you came in? Did I kind of hit it on the head there?
Yeah, I can give you some, like, stories on the early quarters of LeafLink. But one thing that I should lay out is legitimacy and transparency of who's following the regulations is incredibly important. And that was where we started. So every company that's on LeafLink has to show, before they even have an active account, that they have a valid license in the state that they're in. And we've geofenced each market. So if you're in Michigan, you can't see Colorado. Same thing, Colorado, a buyer seeing California. We are truly a collection of 27 different territories, because each marketplace is standalone at the moment. And so we started, first off, let's make sure the permissions are set here properly in a way to be compliant with what regulations exist. Our first client on the platform, a company in Denver, still with us. We spent so much time in their facility, which itself, they've now moved to 3 or 4 other ones since then. But I mean, the way inventory was tracked, the way sales was tracked, the way orders were taken, it was really all on a whiteboard. And they had like that blue masking tape that, basically built cells on a whiteboard, and they would have numbers. So an order would come in on a text to a sales rep. Sales rep would go to the whiteboard and, put the amount that the order was for. And then later in the day, the manufacturing team, the production team would go up to the whiteboard and they'd say, across this ad, there's 10 more available or 50 more units available. And then when it was time to ship, the sales team member would text the fulfillment team that would be packing the boxes on where it was going to go and what the process was. And so it was just all over the place. And we'd sit down with the founders of the company and say, well, how much of X did you sell yesterday? And they'd say, oh, this many. And how many do you think you'll sell tomorrow? Or like, how are you even thinking through your order lifecycle management process? Like, are you using data here? And I'm like, oh, well, these sell well, so we'll make 75 of those and hopefully that's enough. And so it was like, all right, we could bring tools to virtualize, like, let's kill the whiteboard. All right. And Google Sheets and bring it all in one place, get the team engaged there. And then by managing the life cycle of the orders on LeafLink, we were able then to switch on the marketplace by bringing retailers onto the platform as well. And then it was really just like back and forth on that with brands and retailers to build the community.
That's interesting, man, because whiteboards are very prevalent in the cannabis space. I mean, a lot of the grow operations are done on a whiteboard. It's an old school mentality. I can only imagine, going into that, seeing that and being like, hey, what prevents someone from actually brushing their shoulder up against a whiteboard and losing half your information there? Going back to something you said previous, that the regulators are your friends. I imagine the regulators love you because there's now transparency and there's now kind of a track record of the stuff that's going down.
So, I mean, we work really closely with Cannabis Council to make sure we're compliant. At the end of the day, we are a tech company, right? We are not a plant touching company. Mm-hmm. We don't participate in the actual transactions in the same way like a distributor would, for example. But we've spent a ton of time making sure that the way we build everything out, in the back of our minds, we actually thought maybe there was a moment where a regulator would like to have a login to LeafLink. They use other systems like Metric, like BioTrack to track the seed to sale. Maybe there's something else we could provide just with greater transparency for the industry. I think that's a big element of mainstreaming. So we're not a regulated. We don't need to get a cannabis license, and so the regulators we've spoken to have often said to us, "Well, you're not a plant touching company." But we have been thinking a lot about like what can we create to just bring greater transparency to the space, which obviously would be appealing to a regulator as a potential user on LeafLink down the line.
Very cool, man. I think it's great what you guys are doing. So obviously, I'm here in Florida. I have not seen the LeafLink platform in person. How does it work? If I'm a retailer and I'm looking to buy products for my shop, you heard we're going to have Socrates on from Jane. Is it almost like a Jane from the corporate level where it's, okay, I can log in, I can see the brands. If I want to click into a brand, I can see their products and then just place orders? I mean, is it really that simple?
So Socrates, great guy at iHeart Jane, and Ross at Dutchy. They very much, we see the supply chain in like 3 different chunks. So they're very much on B2C. So consumers would go onto one of those 2 platforms and shop similarly to other online marketplaces. We sit in the B2B side. So we connect to the retailers and the brands only if they're licensed. There's no consumers on LeafLink. And then there's another piece on raw material. So if you're a retailer, the use case is, let's say you're a purchasing manager at Harborside, right, in Northern California. You can go on LeafLink and see over 1,500 brands, as I mentioned, and create one cart. And the experience of shopping is you could shop 2 ways, either by product, which is what we're all used to as consumers, or we've built out tools to shop by brand. And so there's a large reordering function as a part of B2B transactions. And so usually if you had 50 of something and it sells out, you're going to buy 50 more or 60, more. Yeah. It's kind of like similarities of that. We have a bunch of sampling features and messaging tools. There's a certain advertising components as well. But what you can do as a purchasing manager is build one cart across many brands. Then we sync up your license with the license of the sellers and create individualized purchase orders that then get shot out to all the different brands. And then they can process the order on the non-whiteboard method that I was talking about earlier and ultimately deliver it to the retailer on the other side of the transaction.
Dude, I mean, that's incredible. So in a past life in college, I was a ordering manager for liquor and it was called Mike's Liquor and Beer Barn. It was a drive-through liquor store. And every Monday, I remember I'd work the morning shift. And we had two ways. I would literally have to walk the store, take inventory, write down what we need. The only way I knew what was selling is by memory, because I worked there 3, 4, 5 days a week. And okay, this sells, this doesn't sell. We're out of this. We should order more of it. And then even for tobacco, we had an advanced system, but we had this little electronic thing that I guess the company gave us, and I would just punch in the quantities of everything we needed. But there was nothing that told me, okay, this is selling, you should order this much of this, or hey, it's game week, so this way you should order 50 more Bud Light kegs or anything else. You're 100% right that this doesn't exist in a lot of other industries, and the fact that it's coming to cannabis first is absolutely incredible. I can imagine that the purchasing managers at these retailers, that you've made their job so much easier, like so much easier.
Well, like that's what we want to do, right? So if you're a brand, we want you to have enough free time and enough efficiency of your operation. Like just make amazing products, right? Sell your brand, build your brand, tell your story, create your mission, and execute on it. Let us help connect you to your buyers and sellers and track the order and finance the order and deliver the order. On the retailer side, same deal. Like if you're an incredible retailer, you're amazing at explaining to a patient what they might need, or on the recreational side, just giving a client more exposure to new brands. Like focus on that. If you're a purchasing manager and you have 10 bud tenders that roll up to you and you have to deal with 40 different sales reps of all these different brands, let us consolidate that for you so you can do an amazing job at being an incredible retailer, right? And then ultimately, hopefully that helps companies grow and we grow together with them. But there's just so many different things that any one company is trying to do. But I think helping them stay focused on what they do best is really what we want to help them achieve.
That's really cool too, man. And I can tell you, as a salesperson myself, I had an initial thought looking at something like this, and I'm like, man, some of these salespeople must be pissed because it's taking it right out of their hands, the ability to make additional sales. But after hearing you explain it just now, my thought process immediately clicked over. I'm like, wait a second. This is extremely beneficial to the salespeople, because now they can focus on opening new accounts, right? If they have large accounts, they don't have to worry about the quantities or anything else. They just have to go show up, make sure they take them to dinner, make sure that they're entertained, keep that account. And realistically, the account management, the little back and forth, like taking the orders and making sure everything else that comes off their plate and it's automated, makes the salesperson job a whole lot easier. I mean, is that the feedback you're seeing, or are there still some of these old school sellers that are kind of thinking that you're coming after them the same way like some of the IT guys did when cloud started coming around?
So like I consider myself somewhat of a salesperson too, right? We built the platform very much together with sales team members at all the first clients, and we continue to do that. Your point of what you said is exactly how people should be thinking about it, right? If you're we did all these different calculations and numbers on the amount of time spent following up on orders. Sometimes sales reps are delivering their own orders. Sometimes they're going up to collect money on an order they've already delivered. Sometimes they're showing up at the wrong time with a retailer. If we could bring efficiency to you as a salesperson and there's a reordering function, you will be able to move more volume of units that you're selling and focus on, to your point, like that top chunk of clients that just require more time because they're your larger buyers. Like focus on those, building, making your funnel much larger on the clients you're servicing, and let us take care of the repeat work through our technology. And then you can build your book. I think that's what we've seen. And there's a number of metrics that we have too around like cart sizes and checkout amounts being larger when they're initiated by the retailer versus, sales rep to the retailer. But there's a ton of opportunity in bringing these efficiencies. And so I think at the end of the day, it's a real win for salespeople as well. And we built it with that in mind.
No, I agree with you. I think, by putting a marketplace out there, and I don't know how visual it is, I imagine that there are visuals, that it kind of increases impulse buying too, right? Like, ooh, that looks cool. Let's see if that'll sell, right? So I can only imagine.
Especially sampling too.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So I have an interesting question, right? And I'm not sure how to approach this one, but when we look at cannabis in general, there's a lot of wholesalers out there, and a lot of them are amazing, right? They put out great products out there. We have legacy strain names and everything else. So when you're a retailer, and this is kind of not LeafLink specific, it's more cannabis industry, right? If I'm a retailer in Colorado or California or something, and I want to get a Blue Dream strain, or I want to get a Gorilla Glue or whatever it is, are there are there reviews or ratings or anything else on the site that kind of helps me pick one over another? Or if I'm going to go with this brand, these are the popular strains or anything else? Because I think to me, that's one of the most confusing things there is, you can get one strain from 200 different companies and it's going to be a different experience. Not every time, but for the most part, because the
Yeah.
genetics are not 100% identical. Is this something that you guys have to deal with or that you see?
We've given a lot of thought to ranking and experience of the purchase. On the consumer side, to what you said, it's really hard to tell. I mean, retailers will tell you what the strain is, but it could be completely different than what it is at another shop. And it might be just that it was not properly communicated to them. And so we've thought through, we don't have like a Yelp-ish, write a review of a client, because sometimes brands and retailers or one company owns both, and we didn't want to create
It
a
could
world
also be
where
bad.
yeah, but what we have created is we have what we call the trusted seller badge. And so we have elements which are more closely tied to objective, KPI numbers around how quickly our orders delivered, how pleased are clients with those orders, how fast do they respond to a sample request or a message you send, have they gone extra training by our team at LeafLink on how to best serve their clients, and then those companies will be trusted sellers. We have a few really exciting updates coming to that as well to further expand upon. There's 1,500 sellers on the platform now, so just to filter through who are the best people to work with. But we've taken some big steps, and there's definitely more to come. So less on the subjective reviewing side, more like objective analysis on who's a great partner for you to be working with on the platform.
Very cool. So let's fast forward to today, and the reason why I've called you as successful as I have. LeafLink LeafLink has over $2 billion in annualized transactions on it. And I think I read that between 25 and 27.5% of the transactions in the cannabis space occur on LeafLink right now.
Yep, that's right.
Dude, it's awesome. Quarter of the market.
Well, there's still 3 quarters to get. So we got a good start, but yeah, thanks. We're proud of that, but there's definitely more for us to hit.
Very cool. So the next thing for LeafLink, and again, I love how you've approached this. You're like, okay, B2B marketplace, let's laser focus on that. Let's build it. Let's make sure it works right. It does everything it needs to before we move on to the next thing. Then the next thing comes along is the number two play, LeafLink Insights. So obviously you've got 27.5% of all transactions in the cannabis space going across your platform. I'm sure the data that you have is absolutely incredible, right? I'm sure the people at New Frontier and BDS and everywhere else would love to get their hands on it. Maybe they have it, maybe they don't, I don't know. But talk to us a little bit more about LeafLink Insights and what that's going to be all about.
Yeah, so we don't share our data with any other companies. And what's interesting about what offering we have, so just go back to the first question. Yeah, LeafLink Insights recently launched. It's been building a ton of momentum, a lot of really great deals that we're excited about from that team. LeafLink Financial and LeafLink Logistics are 2 other things we could talk about. But LeafLink Insights is an incredibly powerful tool because most data in the industry is purchased from POS systems, cleaned up, and then serviced to our clients, the industry generally, hedge funds, whatever it might be. All of our information is completely organic and tied to the transactions that have originated from our platform in the first place. And so we're the only people who have such information. And we thought, instead of selling it to anyone and everyone, let's first create a product which we call My BI, which means My Business Intelligence, that we serve right back to our clients. So like, what more information can we give you about your business based on what we're seeing to keep growing? And so we really wanted to make it as self-empowering as possible. We don't want to sell people's data to anyone and everyone. And the second bit is around it's called MarketScape. So not only do we have information that higher level information we can deliver to you on your company, but if you're thinking about opening up in a new state or a different territory, we can let you know where you stand in terms of market penetration while keeping a lot of information anonymous. And also what markets, what product lines, what price points are things to test out to help you be more successful. And so just as we do everything, it's like LeafLink Insights is our attempt at taking what we know based on where we sit, bring it back to our clients so they could be more effective, builders, operators, companies.
Dude, that's really cool. I mean, I give you so much credit for doing that. And this is why you're a successful entrepreneur. And I'm sitting in my house with a webcam. So I would have taken that information and been like, I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in you. I'm going to invest in you. And I'm going to get really rich and nobody else is going to know. But here you are and giving it back to everybody and making sure that they can take action. But I feel like long-term that benefits you as well, right? Because if people have these kind of insights, they're just going to further use the platform to make better informed decisions. And it's really just streamlining their business. So I think that's really cool. You had
Yeah, I
mentioned
mean, I should say
LeafLink.
we're not trying to disintermediate anyone, right? If our clients grow and we create tools that allow them to grow even faster, that means there's more transactions happening on LeafLink. We could
Oh,
bring even
100%.
we'll make more money, that we can create even more amazing things to serve back to them. They keep growing, so we're really in hand in this amazing partnership that gets us excited.
I look at it, it's the rising tide, right? The rising tide floats all boats because you've had these amazing clients that have leveraged your platform. You've been able to collect this information, and then you're taking this information and providing it back to their clients so they can make actionable decisions on that information, and they grow, you grow with them, the industry grows. And I think there's a lot
Yep.
of people in this industry that don't realize that we're young enough that if we all help each other and the industry grows, we're at a point that I think as long as you're genuine and you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, that we're all going to grow together. I think, and what you're doing is a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
It's incredible. I love, this is why I love the cannabis space, because of things like this, right? In any other
Like,
space,
there's
I'm sure
competitors
people,
in every different level, right? But like, at the end of the day, we have a unified goal of bringing the industry more mainstream, expanding the market to new territories, educating patients and consumers. Like, that's a goal of every company in the space. It's not, I think it's a pretty special thing.
yeah. So you had mentioned LeafLink Financial as well. I briefly saw that in doing my research on you. Talk to us about LeafLink Financial. Are you now helping fund companies or helping them access investors?
So the simplest way to think of LeafLink Financial is it enables payments between brands and retailers. So if we were, I mentioned that there's, sneaker marketplaces. If we were a marketplace for sneakers in another industry, we could pick any merchant processor payment solution off the shelf, plug it in.
Got it.
We can't do that in this space. Similar challenges on LeafLink Logistics. But what we decided to do then was we did a ton of research, and we brought on a teammate named Doug, who had previously started a fintech company, and we spoke with counsel and regulators. And we basically built a product that allows retailers and brands to institute net terms. And so when they're purchasing, what we found, back to like a whiteboard example, was if you're a sales rep, you likely go to the retailer, drop something off, and the retailer might say, I got 50%, or I'll get you in 30 days when you come back, I'll pay for this then.
Yeah.
So basically an IOU. And then in the minds of a lot of people in the industry, this was now about a year and a half, 2 years ago, that was net 30. Because next time I see Todd in 30 days, I would pay him net 30. That's not net 30, right? Net 30 is a contractual arrangement where both people are on the hook to actually follow the process of, this is, how each side of the transaction gets what they agreed to. And so what we've built is, I could get into more detail around it, but basically it's a tool that allows brands to be paid within 48 hours after they drop off a product. And it gives retailers COD, cash on delivery, net 15 or net 30 terms. And we're the fund that stands between those two transactions to make that possible. It's actually something that we're seeing in a lot of other B2B marketplaces as well, outside of cannabis, and how we can bring more value to these transactions that are occurring on our platforms.
These are the stories I love, man, because you are creating a business around adding more value to the industry, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing predatory about that, which is why I love it, right? You're seeing needs and you're filling them, and you're able to spin up businesses around it. And I think people like you in our industry are very needed.
I mean,
And then so you
we
mentioned
found one thing that's interesting about LeafLink Financial that we found when we were doing research around the concept was most brands spend 10 to 15% of their top line revenue on time wasted, lost money, unnecessary effort around just making their simple everyday operation of getting an order to where it needs to go. And so for us, anything less than that we can, any way we can reduce that is incredibly powerful. And that was something that was exciting, because that's an egregious amount of money for these companies to be spending on some of these inefficiencies.
yeah. And then the last thing you had mentioned, you had talked about LeafLink Logistics now. What is that going to be?
So it's a little bit earlier than LeafLink Financial. It's live in one market right now. But one of the things we hear from our clients a lot is that when working with logistics, we have a lot of distributor clients as well. But quite often we'll hear from brands that I think the challenge of a distribution company is that as your book grows of brands you're selling, it's hard to give increased attention to each of the different brands. And so some brands sometimes are hopping from one company to the next, or they're having trouble just getting their product on time, transparently, with solid communication to the retail buyer. And so what we did through LeafLink Logistics is effectively create a program where we verify trusted logistics partners in certain markets that we can push our orders to and allow them to deliver those orders on time, on budget, efficiently. You'll see there's a pattern in everything I'm saying. We're basically just helping create a process and a structure where there wasn't any. And so on the logistics side now, you can make sure that your product gets to the retailer as was promised, as was agreed upon, on time, and it's not damaged. And there's just a whole process that can track, and it's understandable. And so those 3 points, the marketplace, payments, and logistics, we call that the LeafLink triangle. And we think by continuing to close the triangle is how you'll be able to continue to have a leading position in the space, because these are clear needs of our clients, and they need these solutions to keep growing their businesses.
How do you gather all this information? I mean, how much time are you spending with retailers and wholesalers to figure out, okay, these are the problems, these are the nuances of it, boom, okay, we think we have a solution, let's implement it?
I mean, it's all our team. We spend a ton of time talking to clients, and even all the things that we've talked about that we've created, they've all started from feedback we've gotten from our clients. We have amazing team members on client-facing teams, also in some of these more specialized offerings that I talked a little bit about, that, I mean, is physically in market with clients, keeping them posted along the way on the progress that we're making. And it's really just listen and iterate on what solutions we can bring them to help improve their situation. That's what we've always done, because there are so many needs in the space right now, and there's a lot of other providers that won't. I mean, when we first got into the industry, there was some accounting software that didn't even service companies in the space. It was ridiculous, and so we want to be the partners that they can communicate with to really build out in the best way possible the things they need to realize their internal mission.
That's cool, man. I think it's, what you guys are doing is great. And I mean, you're taking the information and processing it. I mean, I saw one of the things that you said, business ideas are worthless. Execution is everything. Right. And you guys are executing on it. Right. So what you guys are doing is perfect. I want to switch over to the financial side of things, right? You've been very successful at raising capital for the business, and rightly so, because you're doing, you're coming out with new products. The products that you're doing you're hitting the goals that you've set for yourself. And I'm sure that you've put in front of your investors. I imagine your investors are relatively happy, because investors are never always happy people. And I can say that. You don't have to say that, so you don't piss anybody off. What was it like when you first started going around raising capital for the company? Because I know a lot of cannabis companies and cannabis funds. We had Emily Paxi on here from Poseidon talking about how they were laughed out of investment rooms because people just didn't believe in cannabis. You kind of have a different approach, because you're not, like you said, you're not a plant touching company. You're not a cannabis company. You're a tech company. Do you think it was a little easier for you, or did you still have that cannabis stigma attached?
There's for sure a heavier lift if you're a plant touching company, no doubt about that. We are a technology company, and so for us, it's definitely a little bit easier. I'd agree there. We were never laughed out of any rooms, but we spent a ton of time going through our meetings we've appealed to a lot of more traditional venture capital fund investors, and a number of the funds we've been really lucky to work with, we were their first investment in even a cannabis facing technology company. A few of them have made investments that followed based on, I hope, what's been a good experience with LeafLink so far. But I mean, a large part of those meetings were educating, and we still regularly speak to investors, because even if people aren't comfortable writing a check into the industry right now, there's some incredibly exciting things happening in our space, and we should be loud about that. People should know that if you don't get this now, let me arm you with some information to why you should be paying attention. And then in 3 or 4 years, when you ultimately kick yourself for not having gotten involved or making some investments in the space, or maybe you now will because of what you know. That's again like us doing our piece on helping push the space a bit forward. So it was definitely challenging, but we were pretty clear in those meetings. We said, if you're not comfortable making investment in the space, a lot of funds can't for a number of reasons.
Yeah.
No worries. But let's tell you about what we're doing anyway. And we were able to build relationships with a lot of funds like that. And hopefully other companies have been funded because, maybe we were a part of that process and letting these individuals that weren't in the space get excited about it. But it's always challenging to raise money, but we're also not a company that's always raising money. We'll go to market, 60, 90 days max, close around, and then we're back at it. Like, we're building a company in the day. We're not a company that exists to raise capital. Whereas I think, sometimes there's so much praise around just raising money, which is like, what are you going to do with that makes it worthwhile, right? Like, raising money in and of itself is like, I don't think it's really that much of an achievement. It's like what you deploy it against, which is how we very much think.
No, I agree with you. I've been on both sides of those meetings, and there's a lot of people in this industry that are raising capital to raise capital, and you go through their pitch decks and everything else, and their entire pitch deck is on the size of the opportunity in the market. And it's like, okay, I got that, but what's the size of your opportunity? And I'm digressing here, but you guys, like, I go back to it, you guys were very successful at raising capital, and rightly so. Were most of your early investments, were you able to leverage the relationship from your last company, because your last company was focused on the alternative investing space and a lot of funds in that space?
So our first round of capital that we raised was basically all of the investors that had previously invested in my company, and some advisors from Zach's company as well. So it was for them less an investment even in cannabis, because this was like almost 5 years ago. There was only one market. So it was less of them taking the reach on cannabis. And we had a couple meetings where like, I don't know about this idea, but like, you guys are doing it, so we're in. And a lot of people had just, made money on the last thing we were doing. So we had a little bit of an advantage on that. Later on, when we did our seed round with a large fund out of New York, and our A and our B, all those were more traditional funds. They were less of a, friends, family, angel fund raise. And so there's a lot more work that goes into those, but we had a little bit of a leg up because people knew what our deal was going into it.
That's really cool that you had a group of people that were willing to bet on you again. They made a bet the first time, they won their bet, and now, hey, Ryan, whatever you're doing, we've got your back. Oh, it's cannabis? Yeah, sure, why not? We've got you. So that's really cool. Now we're getting up on the top of the hour here, and I promised Maddie I'd keep you under an hour. Talk to me about what you see going on in the industry, because I have a whole lot of theories about what the cannabis space is going to look like once it reaches maturity, 5-10 years from now, whatever it is. I noticed that you had talked about edibles overtaking traditional cannabis forms, right? When it comes to looking at the way that people are consuming cannabis, would you say that the traditional form of cannabis, smoking a joint, smoking flower, whatever that is probably going to be one of the smaller parts of the market, or is it already there?
So I have two answers to what I think is happening in the space, which I'll talk about in a sec. But in terms of like category allocation, brands, whether they're edibles or any kind of, like, I think THC infused product, that is just where margin is going to exist as the industry continues to mature. And so in the more mature or like older markets that we service, older by, I'm talking about a year to 3 years, there's definitely a smaller grouping or the amount of flower sold continues to shrink, just because just growing the plant by itself, there'll always be boutique brands and high quality brands, but just that as the whole business is it's just not as profitable as it used to be. And so they have to create brands and stories and packages and packaging and all that stuff that makes it appealing to the end user, and even the patient or consumer. In the space generally, I think two things. One is like what I'm looking forward to, excited about, is that I think it's been a rough year pandemic, social injustice, so many things that need to be addressed that are going to take a long time to figure out. I think on the pandemic side, cannabis has been deemed essential, which, like, that was a big moment for our space. I think we'll look back on 5 years where you have this federally illegal substance, which pretty much every state that's legalized it, not only do they stand behind it, but they deem it essential to continue to operate, which is really powerful, right? So we went from illegal to regulated to essential. That's special. Similar to the coronavirus and what's going around in the pandemic, the number of unemployment checks that have been cut by each of these states, I mean, I don't know how they're going to balance their budgets, right? They're going to need to look for additional tax revenue streams, and they're not going to raise taxes, but like, here we go. There's this incredible product that people are already purchasing and needs to be regulated. That I think we'll see more states in the next 12 to 18 months really seriously considering going legal. Second piece of what I'm excited about the industry is I think we still really have an opportunity to build into how we're thinking about the culture of the space, addressing some of the social injustices, which are at the top of, a lot of our minds. Our whole history of cannabis is a social injustice, right? The pioneers of our space were victims of the war on drugs, the failed war on drugs. And what can we build now into the industry by becoming intelligent and educated on that experience to make it part of the space moving forward, right? And there's a lot of different territories that are thinking, or regulators are thinking through this, but I think also us as companies, we've been thinking a lot internally at LeafLink is how do we more deeply ingrain perpetuating more social progress into our own company. We're still a company of just over 100, small company, but like, let's make an impact where we can. And I think that's something that our whole space can do collectively as well, which we're excited about. And I think is pretty unique. Another way we can become a model for other industries that have been around longer than us.
No, and I couldn't agree with you more. That's something I talk about on this space a lot. I mean, I look at this industry, and this is an industry of a ton of female-led companies and female executives, right? And they're very prominent in our space. And it's not just because, oh, it's a female. They're crushing it, right? We have a lot of people of color and minorities in this space. It's a very accepting industry, and I agree with you. I hope that other industries look at us and try to replicate this model and see the success and see the camaraderie in this industry. And a couple of things that you said, I think are 100% spot on. You're up in New York. You've got that beautiful picture of the city above you. New York has been threatening to legalize adult use cannabis for a while. We've all seen Governor Cuomo on the news over and over again. Like him or not, he's a man who realizes that the federal government is not going to provide him with enough relief funds to get his state out of the deficit that it's going to be in. I can only imagine how badly he wants to legalize cannabis so he can collect that tax income. Do you think that New York goes adult use the next time they're able to vote? And I wanted to say before the end of the year, but honestly, I have no clue when that would even be voted on. So I'm not even going to pretend I know.
I mean, there are certain states obviously our most active markets are on the West Coast. We have an office in LA. There are some states like New York where if you asked me that question 18 months ago, I would have said probably yeah in the next, 18, 24 months. And it's just that's been the answer time and again. And I've been wrong a few times. We're getting one at some point we'll be right. I don't know when that's going to be, but yeah, it's really unfortunate that I think generally pretty progressive thinking states are just like at least now 5 years behind some of the other states. But what will be cool is like now that you said New York, hopefully Cuomo goes and reaches out to Hickenlooper, right, over in Colorado, and like let's use some of the mistakes made and learnings from other markets. Like you're not the first state doing this anymore, right? You're not some pioneer. Work with other regulators, work with other politicians, governors to figure this out. And I think that's really what will help us move faster. You don't have to trial and test everything as much because we have over a dozen now proven markets of this makes a lot of sense and it works.
It's really cool. Listen, I like what you're saying. I hope it works. I've had a lot of talks on the show about comparing this to the end of prohibition of alcohol. Part of the reason that they repealed prohibition of alcohol is because they missed the tax revenue, right? So we look at our country, we're in a pandemic, we're going to need income. I think this is to me, it's a no-brainer, right? It's going to bring back retail. It's going to bring back logistics. It's going to bring back agriculture. It's going to create jobs. It's going to create blue-collar jobs. It's going to create white-collar jobs. It's going to bring money into the system. So I hope it's a no-brainer. Ryan, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. It really has. I appreciate you coming on. I think you're an excellent ambassador for our industry. I
Thanks.
love seeing you, all your interviews. I saw you on, I think, Squawk Box on CNBC. You're all over the place. I'm really looking forward to continue watching you grow. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, Todd, thanks for having us. Always love talking about these things, and appreciate what you're doing as well.
Absolutely, man. Before I let you go, is there anything that we want to promote? LeafLink.com, anywhere else we can find you, social media, any of that stuff?
Yeah, if you have any, if you're watching this, have any questions about LeafLink, feel free to shoot us a note at info@leaflink.com or sales@leaflink.com. We'll connect you with the right person to talk through and help get to the next level in your business as you guys continue to grow, guys and gals continue to grow as well. So feel free to reach out, and looking forward to getting in touch.
Awesome, man. Well, I definitely want to have you back on the show in a future date. Hopefully post-pandemic, we can talk about some trends and everything else that you saw. But
Yep.
ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching the show. If you want to check out Cannabis Lab, the reason that we're able to do this show every week, www.joinclab.com. We're running specials on membership all the time. Great panels and great insights that you can get from a lot of the thought leaders in our space. Beyond that, you find us on YouTube. www.youtube.com, go in the search bar, search Elevate Your Grind, and hit the subscribe button. Thank you very much, folks. This has been another episode of Elevate Your Grind, and we're out. Hey, man, thank you very much. That was good.
Cool. Yeah, thanks. Good conversation. Appreciate you having us.
No, I really appreciate you and coming on, man. Like I said, you've been on much bigger shows than this, so I appreciate you taking the time.
All good. Yeah, happy to be here.
Absolutely, man. Well,
All right,
appreciate it.
Stay safe.
You too. Bye.
All right, bye.